Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Cara Augustenborg, an environmental scientist and policy fellow at University College Dublin and a broadcaster with News Talk FM. And it's my pleasure to be moderating this event organized by Vita Ireland, which is an Irish development partner working with farmers and rural communities in Africa for over 30 years. Vita's goal is to facilitate thriving rural climate-smart economies in Africa with access to services, markets, and livelihoods for all. And this gathering is supported by Irish Aid, which supports Vita's programs that include climate change adaptation and mitigation in the Horn of Africa. Irish Aid, for those of you who may not be familiar, is the Irish government's overseas development program, which is funded by the Irish taxpayers. So to kick off today, Vita Ireland have produced a beautiful 2-minute video about their work and the aim of today's discussion. Thanks to Isabel for playing up that great video, which I think really gives us a sense of what we're going to talk about today. So this event includes both a short film screening and a discussion afterward with a panel of experts in Ethiopia and Ireland. But first, I invite you to sit back, maybe with your lunch or a cup of something warm, and take in a beautiful and inspiring 10-minute film about how churches in Ethiopia are showing leadership on climate action. As you may be aware, within Ireland's recent vision for international development, A Better World, climate action is prioritized for those countries that are most vulnerable to climate breakdown and the least equipped to prepare for it. So let's travel to Ethiopia right now through the power of technology to find out more about how a faith community there is responding.
In Ethiopian Orthodox teaching, a church, to be a church, should be enveloped by a forest. It should resemble the Garden of Eden. A 100 years ago, the highland was one big continuous forest. That big continuous forest has been eaten up by agriculture. It is the church who has protected this forest and who has safeguarded them from destruction. It's only because of the patronage and the blessing of the church these forests have survived. Church forests are always in my childhood memory. I used to go with my family for Sunday Mass, for holidays. We have been always told that God gives mercy when you pray here. So the spiritual connectivity is so strong. The more I study them, the more I understand them, the more I see their problem, their importance, their significance, and then I end up being hooked with this forest, you know.
በየጽዋቶች ላይ የእግዚአብሔር ኃይል አለ፣ የእግዚአብሔር ጸጋ አለ፣ የእግዚአብሔር በረከት አለ። ስለዚህ አንዲትን ዛፍ የተከለ ሰው በተወዛወዘች ቁጥር እድሜውን ትለምንለታል ይችላል። ተተኪ ደኖችም ተተኪ ትውልድ እንደምናፈረው ሁላ የጽዋት ተተኪ ትውልዶችም የሉም። ሲወጡ ገና ይበላቸዋል። እያለቁ እነሱ ትልቁ ሲወድ ተተኪ ያጣና ደኑ ከንቱ ይሆናል። እና አጥሩ በጣም ጠቃሚ ቤተክርስቲያናችን እሷን ካጣች ግን ራሷን ታጣለች።
The idea of making a wall to conserve the forest came from the church itself. If you see the rural church, they have a wall to protect the inner circle, which people think that's the most sacred place. So let's move that wall to the outside and include the forest as part of the church itself. We are making a barrier, not excluding humans, a barrier against cattle grazing, so that regeneration and the health of the forest can be sustained. The church has been protecting the forest for centuries. But the forest in turn has been a guardian. It was a kind of mutual benefiting. The church itself were built from this forest. The inner wall of the church has been painted. And all those pictures, scriptures and murals were made out of tree leaves, roots, barks and flowers 800, 700, even 1,000 years ago. They are living by one another. They are embedded to one another. The church is within the forest is inside the church. In ecological term, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. There are millions of other creatures. There is so complicated, sophisticated interaction you cannot explain. Because of the coexistence, there is what we call emergent property. It's a new hybrid character. The mystery is to think beyond what we see. There is a problem always, a misperception that this forest would stay forever. We don't have any other backup to safeguard the Ethiopian biodiversity. It is only the church forest. If we lose that, then that's all.
ያለቀ ከመሄድ እንዲድን አንዳንዴ ድንበሩም አይታወቅም። በተለይ ትውልድ ሲያልፍ ትልልቅ አባቶች ሲያልፍ ወጣቱ ጎረምሳ ገበሬ ሲመጣ ወደ ጥግ እየመጣ ያርሳል። ያኔ ድንበሩ ይጠፋል እና ይሄ የድንጋዩ አጥር ዋናው ጥቅሙ ከብት እንዳይገባ።
The biggest challenge is to open the eyes of the community to show up these forests are really disappearing. They think always they are there forever. The church forests are the blueprint. You can understand what kind of ecosystem, what kind of biodiversity, what kind of forest we had before. Everything is important and interlinked. So if you really care, we have to respect trees, the role of trees, and we have to learn to live with forests. We can bring back the landscape given that these church forests exist. That's my hope, that's my vision.
Thanks to the director, Dr. Jeremy Seaford, for sharing his film, which makes me want to go out and plant some trees right now. I'm delighted now to be joined by our guests in both Ireland and Ethiopia. Carmel Irandoust is the former Deputy Secretary General of the Bahá'í International Community and also formerly involved in advocacy for World Vision Dublin and for the United Nations headquarters in New York. Sam Kappler is the program officer with Vita, supporting their programs in Eritrea, working with in international development since 2011 on several projects that collaborate with religious institutions and faith leaders. Suzanne Ryder is the communications coordinator for the Sisters of Mercy Western Province. And Dr. Alemayehu Wasse is the CEO of the Organization for Rehabilitation and Development in Amhara, or the ORDA. And he also serves as Forest Development Project Coordinator, Head of Planning and Programming. And of course, you would recognize him from the film we just watched. If you'd like to participate in this conversation through social media, the hashtag is #OurCommonHome. Dr. Wasse, I'll start with you because I'm so curious about your work now that having watched this film. You've been working in deforestation since 1992, and yet, as we know, this travesty continues all over the world today. So I think we have a lot to learn from your wealth of experience. In the film, you described yourself as being hooked with these forests. So what do you see as the connection between spirituality and sustainability and the role of faith-based organizations in particular in promoting stewardship with our environment and raising awareness of the climate and biodiversity crises?
Thank you very much, first of all, for giving this opportunity. I'm really delighted to appear in front of many people. Well, as a forester, if you are in Ethiopia, you always try to look where is the resource, where is the natural forest. So I didn't realize the importance of church forest until I became a forester. I trained a professional forester because then I had to study where is the resource, where is our natural forest, because Ethiopia has suffered a lot for deforestation for the last 100 years. And it's very rare to see untouched, intact natural forest. Some people might confuse by looking some plantations from eucalyptus, which is exotic. But when you seriously look, where is our natural vegetation, then you see the church forest. They are the only place where you see the original leftover of the northern highland, what we call Triaphro mountain forest. There are so many of them, over 35,000. It could range from half hectare to several hundred hectares, in some cases in thousands. So when I try to study seriously where is our vegetation, then church forest is obviously there. Then it goes back to your childhood memory. I mean, as a child, came from Christian family, you know, you used to go there and you used to know the forest very well. But later, when profession comes, then things become more clear. That's why I said then childhood and adulthood, the childhood memory and then the adulthood knowledge, you know, fit together. And I end up, you know, this is my real profession and my destiny. So spirituality, as you know, is the most consistent thing in human life. Political ideology could change. Political policies, government policies could vary, could be revised, but religious principles are very consistent. Once you believe in it, then you live on it. You know, it's a lifetime commitment. That's why this forest, regardless of ups and downs in our ideology, political regime change, and everything, spirituality consistently have been able to preserve those forests. So, well, spirituality is the most strong value humankind can offer for conservation. That's what I would believe. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have your perspective from Ethiopia and all of your experience. I'd like the other speakers to come in and kind of add to Dr. Wasse's contribution here. But I'll start with Carmel. Ireland, Carmel, as you know, has committed to playing a key role in climate negotiations. I know you've worked on advocacy in this issue. And of course, the focus on the most vulnerable is a key theme across many different faith traditions, including your own, and ties in with messages of many institutions which are religious, like the missionaries, for example. So what role do you all see for religious institutions and faith communities in ensuring the interests of the most vulnerable in our own societies and across the world, and representing that discourse on climate action? So Carmel, if you could kick off on that, and then the same question to our other two speakers too.
Sure. So thank you already to Vita for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I'm very humbled by first of all watching this video, but also what Dr. Wasse is sharing with us, and that he can be with us. I think I read in his bio that he's a writer, and so and a good poet. So I came across this beautiful quote from Gary Snyder, which is, he's an American poet, and he said that nature is not a place to visit, it is home. And so that goes well with our hashtag, that is our common home, isn't it? So please hashtag around. So to the question that you have asked, and actually it's a good thing, I think, that Ireland And I've watched and I've read last night the document, Our Better World. And, I think that Ireland has really a big role to play now in holding accountable not only its citizens, but also the other countries of the world to this climate action. We know that they were just elected to the Security Council for 21-22, and they have said that partnership, equality, and independence were the key attributes of this campaign. So this idea again of partnership and equality is something that is very much so needed in the way that they're gonna, interact with their different sister, governments, but also with the NGOs that they're funding, obviously, and without mentioning the fact that Ireland and Kenya were really part of this building of the framework of the SDGs. But to answer to your question directly about the religious institutions and what they can do to really bring the most vulnerable part of in the discourse of climate change, I think that there's a huge role to not see women and young people as vulnerable. They are actually really key agents of change in this matter of climate change. And, women are actually part of the most, they're really the backbone of agriculture and of workforce today. They don't have access to science, you see. Most of them don't have access to this knowledge, which is really, I believe, a gift of understanding that each one we have. So if our women don't have this knowledge, they cannot actually be empowered to help towards climate action. And so they're not the most vulnerable. But yet religious leaders more and more have a role to play to empower their women, but also the young people in their communities. I was in Uganda with World Vision Ireland, and I was able to see that actually small groups of religious leaders were involving some of the women, but not so much the young people. So how can we make sure to encourage this idea that no matter what gender, no matter what age, these are key agents of change, isn't it? For this, and not most vulnerable. I don't believe in this.
Thank you. It's a really good point. I think we can see how climate change is an intergenerational justice issue, because it obviously
Exactly.
it's to get worse as the years pass on. But it's interesting that I've written a bit myself about the lack of female representation at climate negotiations and how disproportionately impacted women can be when it comes to climate impacts. And it always comes as a surprise to people to hear this. They think that they're two very separate issues, but they're very much integrated. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. Suzanne, if I could come to you next with your experience with the Sisters of Mercy, if you could maybe talk more practically about the role of religious institutions and faith communities in addressing the climate crisis.
I hope I can do justice to our sisters and all that is done. Really, women religious are at the forefront of sharing the news of the universe story and living it out in different ways. So I would say, first of all, on a practical basis, like in our province, we have a centre on Gorgine, which works with the local community, and nationally, people go there, or did before the COVID restrictions, to have earth literacy and to work on that. And then on the spirituality side, our spirituality centre, Galilee, is actually it's adapting to the restrictions and doing a Zoom series at the moment called Active Hope, and giving people the sense that really there's something to be done, and nature is to be enjoyed. I suppose we've taken a long time to own the truth that everything is sacred, all life is sacred, and the interconnectedness of life is so important. I loved in the video there hearing every plant contains the power of God. And if the more we embody that, the more the good news of that goes out. But I'd say there's a whole other section too. Women religious are, diminishing or increasing in our age profile. And we're realizing that doing it's secondary really to us. We had a speaker recently talking on Vocations Ireland about that ministry is only part of our lives. The life itself is so important. And we're embracing more a contemplative dimension. So by our very contemplative prayer, we're part of the great turning, the new step in evolution, which is moving towards realizing the sacredness of Earth, realizing that we are part of this, and realizing that the Earth itself, the universe, is guiding us. So that really we need to be optimistic and to look at, to I suppose, embrace the truth that Dostoevsky said, that beauty will save the world, and looking at the beauty of every part of nature. Have I gone on too long, Cara?
Perfect. And you have the perfect backdrop of Loch Mask to really drive that point home. And I'm so glad you mentioned the need for hope and the role, of course, that faith-based communities have historically in giving people hope, because I do think that that's something people are really crying out for right now. So thank you for that, Suzanne. Sam, if I could come to you on this question, given your wealth of international development experience and working directly with faith-based organizations and faith-based leaders across the world, what's your perspective on this topic?
I think in answering the question about how we keep the most vulnerable at the heart of the discussion, I think faiths drawn from their own broader teachings can help ensure that the principle of justice remains at the heart of discussions around climate action. I think sometimes discussion about the impact of climate change, especially in parts of the world where we're perhaps somewhat shielded from the direct everyday impact, can sometimes seem to deal mostly in the abstract, like it's cloaked in the language of science, it's dealing in hypotheticals, it's about processes that we might not be able to perceive in real time, it's about nature. That's often how it's heard, rather than being about people. And faith and religion, I think, can really play a role in helping the discussion remain focused on people. Like, climate change is about people. If you care about poverty and the associated suffering, then you must also care about climate change. And because religious traditions and institutions are often rooted in their local communities, but they also have like a global reach and voice, they can help make sure that those conversations don't become too detached from that everyday lived human experience of folks at the sharper end. And they also have, I think this is an important point, they also have the language and reference points to lead with these themes of compassion, love, solidarity, empathy, these deep human concepts that influence all our behavior, but you're very unlikely to find that type of language in the Sustainable Development Goals or a national climate action plan or something like that. And secondly, I think as well in the West, there's a danger that discussion of climate change becomes like hyper individualized. The rhetoric of we're all in it together, everyone can play a role, collective responsibility is completely valid and very useful, but at times inadvertently that can mask some of the power dynamics at play. Of course, we're not all equally responsible, we're not all equally likely to be impacted, and also we're not all equally well placed to be impactful in our attempts to change course. And I think that systemic nature of climate change can become a little bit obscured when the conversation is dominated by issues of our own consumption behaviour, for example. So, I mean, I think faiths can draw on their own traditions and teachings to make sure that debates around climate action are always kind of located in a discourse of social and economic justice. And, while we rightly, ask those questions of ourselves as individuals and reflect on our behaviour, we don't lose sight of our interconnectedness and those structural issues. To build on a theme from the film, if we want to protect ecosystems, then we need to take something of an ecological approach to our climate action, and that might require appealing to people, to those deeper human capacities for understanding each other and connecting to each other, as well as appealing to reason.
Thanks, Sam. You're absolutely right. Us policy wonks hate to talk about feelings, and that is an obstacle to getting people to engage with this issue. So that brings us really well onto the next theme of this discussion, which is the broader theme of our common home and sustainability and spirituality in the face of the climate crisis. And one of the themes that really emerged from the film, and it jumped out at me, is the challenge of opening the eyes of the community and the public into how our natural environment is changing over time, and our own agency in that process. So if I could go back to you, Alemayehu, do you think that faith leaders can do more to meet this challenge of public awareness?
Yes. I think what we had and what we believed has brought us to this level. If I speak particularly to Ethiopian Orthodox Church forests, they have survived, and now we're able to do something, at least to have them. But it cannot continue like that. So we have to do more, because the religious phase teachings are there consistently, but the outside environment has changed a lot. New generation has come, population has increased, globalization, all these things has come. The economic growth demand has become very tough. So the religious and faith leaders must understand that the outside environment is really very dynamic and changing. So they have to cope up with that. Of course, I don't expect all from them, but from the other side also, from conservationists, academicians, or policymakers, this is a time we have to work together. This is a mutual thing. One of the challenge I faced when I speak about Ethiopian church forest, many people, academicians and policymakers, think this is the church matter. That's a church business. This is not my business. But as you know, natural resources like forests they're boundaryless. I care about forests in Amazon. It doesn't matter who owns there. You care about Africa, even though you are living in Europe, because we breathe from the same forest. So we have to now jump beyond our boundaries. So the religious leaders must get out of their confinement and then work together with the outside world. When I say the outside world, I mean with the conservationists, with academicians, with aid agencies, policymakers. We have to work with the same goal, because we are living in one planet. Ultimately, either we swim together or we sink together, So I will urge in both directions to move towards mutual understanding and cooperation. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Wasse. Carmel, I think Dr. Wasse really set the challenge of what we need to do and what faith leaders need to do. In your own experience, at the UN and with the Bahá'í community, do you have examples where faith communities have shown leadership on this issue and helped increase awareness on the climate crisis?
Thank you, Cara. It's actually, the image came to mind of how can we actually marry the principles of science and religion. So it's actually one of the main principles of the Baha'i faith. I don't know if people know, but the Baha'i faith is a world religion, and its purpose is really to safeguard, the well-being, the interests, and the well-being of all the human race, and to foster the spirit of love and fellowship amongst men. And another idea is really this idea that true peace and tranquility will only be realized when every soul will have become the well-wishers of all mankind. So what Dr. Wasse was really mentioning is this idea of unity, and really see ourselves as Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, has brought, is this idea that we are all really the members of one human body and we must all unite. But this principle of harmony between science and religion, I wanted to come to it because unless and until faith can see that science is actually needed, we will not be able to move forward, you know. And so in the video, it was saying that some people in the community thought that these trees will always be there. But this idea of empowerment through science is very important. And so if we don't have science, we have an extreme of religion, which bring us to fanaticism. If we don't have religion and faith in science, then we go to crude materialism. So an image comes to mind, which is that material civilization is likened to a lamp, and while spiritual civilization is the light in the lamp. If the material and spiritual civilization become united, then we will have the light and the lamp together, and the outcome will be perfect. For material civilization is likened to a beautiful body, and spiritual civilization is likened to the spirit of life. So this little image that I shared with you is something that I grew up with from the Baha'i writings. Now, a practical example that I have for you is what I've seen in actually in what the Baha'i community have been trying very humbly to do all around the world. They have Baha'i temple, Baha'i houses of worship. They're all across the world in different continents. And they belong really, and they have space for the community to gather, no matter what faith, no matter what background, where people can get together and really practice prayer and service together. So they go to these places, they can get meditation and prayers, and then they give back to their communities. And so these temples are actually all around the world. And one of them, and you can see actually they're designed even in the way that can marry really with the culture and the values of the land where it's actually being erected. And a real consultation is happening with the people of the land, you see, whether they're Baha'is or not. And they say, what is it that we're expecting from this space? How can we really transform it and make it a place of meditation and prayers, and where we can then get inspired to be able to give back to our community? And so there is one in Norte del Cauca, or one in Chile, or one in India. And one can see that they're very inspiring places that that are married with the environment, and that yes, just bring this inspiration, you know. But I really think that religious leaders could really help a lot by uniting, as Dr. Wasse was saying, with their policymakers, with other NGOs, to try to really bring change, you know, and contribute towards the progress of our humankind.
Yeah, your example sounds very much like Dr. Wasse's example in Ethiopia too, where the church is surrounded by a forest, which I just loved. Coming from America, I very much see this division between faith and science, and it seems to be getting worse there. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but are you seeing the same problem in other parts of the world, or do you have suggestions for how to deal with that on a public level, and how to marry those two issues together a bit more?
So it goes back to what I was sharing earlier, you see, Cara, about this idea of that we all have a gift of understanding. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, from the mountains in Bolivia, where people didn't know how to read and write, from the high spheres of the United Nations headquarters, where I was with some of the world leaders and ambassadors, or even in the Holy Land, you know, where I was representing the Baha'i international community. It didn't matter who I was with, even 50 kilometers from the Syrian border, with women, Syrian women and children. Everybody has a gift of understanding that is unique. And that's where faith-based organizations are very powerful, is that they really believe in this, you see. Mm-hmm. Every religion believes in the uniqueness, and in the, as Sam was mentioning earlier, this idea that everybody is really unique and have talents and potentiality. So what I mean is that once a space is created in the communities, no matter what background, creed, religion, or social je ne sais pas, status, and when you bring that up, everybody has an opinion, you see. Mm-hmm. So everybody has a voice and everybody can participate. So the idea is only to create a space where everybody is welcome, and not only those who are from the same party, you know, the red team or the blue team, mm-hmm. or the green team, mind you. Because if not, it's a very self-satisfying discourse, no?
Yeah.
But that's where I think is amazing is that we saw in the video, a whole space was created for the people of the community to come and discuss about the future of the church that was there for 1,000 years, you know?
Yeah.
These spaces should be more, I think.
Yeah.
And these topics should be maybe explored. I don't have the answer, but I think that the more we create spaces, the more we will be able to, you know, to explore that.
Yeah,
Sorry, it was a bit long.
No, it's an excellent point that really gets to the heart of this kind of polarization that's been happening in places like the US. Suzanne, if I could move to you with your direct experience with the Sisters of Mercy, you mentioned the need to, you know, bring in the message of hope. And I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions for how maybe non-religious and more secular environmental and civil society organizations can learn from faith communities and religious institutions like you and incorporate that kind of understanding into their own work on climate action.
Well, we're all the one. As Carmel was talking, I couldn't see anything that would go against what I believe in from the Bahá'í religion. Like really, we all have to work together. And from Pope Francis, like you were using that phrase, our common home, and he has it so clearly, and he speaks, like he's such a leader in this area. Like he speaks about respecting people of all faiths and none. But of course, there has been a chasm in the Roman Catholic Church between science and faith, as if they were like coming to the same conclusions, but as if there was a separation between them. And I think that they're becoming more enmeshed now. And certainly maybe it's easier for us as women religious to embrace all and to include all than it is for a local Roman Catholic parish. But really, if we listen to Pope Francis and the wonders in Laudato Si and live out from there, we will be touching on the really important features. But of course, this science, I remember when Thomas Keating, who was not Thomas Keating, sorry, Thomas Berry, who wrote the Universe Story with Brian Swim, a seminal book. When he came to Ireland in 1995, I was like a groupie. I followed him everywhere. And I was staying one night in Cork with some cousins and talking about all of this. I was excited about it. And two young cousins, they were in their early 20s, and their answer was, science is going to sort it all out. And to me, that's not the answer either. We cannot say it's all scientific, and it must be a blend of both. And we're certainly doing it as women religious. We're investigating this. I think it's clear that I know another person I would follow a lot is Thomas Keating, who set up the whole area of contemplative outreach. And he is in dialogue. He was in dialogue. He has died now, but 2 years ago. And he was in dialogue with Ken Wilber, who is a Buddhist. And he saw no difference. They worked together. And that dialogue just needs to be extended, understood, and chatted about. A conversation. We've got to move this on as we do the practical things, realizing that our whole understanding needs to expand all the way.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned Laudato Si, because I have used it in my own work in communicating climate change issues to the public and find it very inspirational. But I noticed a lot of people haven't read it, don't really know about it. It's not really kind of public knowledge in a widespread way. So how do you bring those kind of messages to the general public, without kind of seeming like you're pushing some sort of religious message on them, maybe?
But that understanding is growing. I was part of a book club on Laudato Si, led by Jane Mellett with Trocra. Mm-hmm. It was excellent. We went right through the book. I'm ashamed to say I hadn't read it. I hadn't read Laudato Si before, but I really got so into it. So that Trocra is doing something there. And these book clubs are extending around Ireland anyway. And I'm sure there are other events around the world which are doing this. I must say, I have great hope in young people. Like the climate action, Greta Thunberg has really been a leader there, and younger people are getting this. They're realizing we don't need these trappings that divided science and spirituality. They are realizing we have one planet, planet Earth. We don't have plan B, a planet B, as they put in some of their placards. And so it is becoming more the conversation of all of humanoids, all of us together.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I always point out that, you know, we've had in Ireland, we've had a green schools program through Antashka for about 26 years now. So, you know, anyone 26 years and younger has had environmental and natural sciences kind of embedded in their entire educational curriculum. Whereas I didn't hear about climate change until I went to graduate school. Like I never got this stuff as a kid. So they understand it at a level that I think older people maybe just weren't exposed to, and you know, don't get the interconnectedness and the interdependency of us on nature in the way that younger people do. So I'm glad you mentioned that. If I could come to you, Sam, given your experience working with religious institutions and international development, what can we in civil society maybe learn from them in terms of responding to climate action and the need for climate action?
Or maybe just pick up on the kind of union of science and faith that everyone else is kind of touched upon in different ways. You know, faith leaders have in crisis circumstances in the past really stepped up in shaping, you know, practices and behaviors that, you know, have helped people protect themselves and protect others, both in terms of, you know, leveraging their trusted voice at community level, but also, you know, placing those messages in, you know, the context of their own theology and scripture for people to kind of internalize. An example comes to mind is during the HIV and AIDS epidemic in Africa, maybe 25 years ago, where religious leaders working with the health sector and also NGOs were really instrumental in many communities in completely transforming not only the attitude to the disease, but also the attitude to people living with the disease, and reduce stigmatization to the point that people could come forward and disclose their status, could come and get tested. And, you know, in some cases that represented like a 180-degree turn in the role that faith institutions were playing in that particular crisis. More recently, in the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, pastors and imams played a critical role in contextualizing messages from health workers and aid workers to keep people safe, you know, particularly around like safe burial practices and stuff like that. In both of those cases, you know, faith-based NGOs worked directly with faith leaders to kind of develop resources to allow them to do that and place those messages in the theological context. There's other examples as well, but from what I can remember, most of these initiatives have tended to focus on issues around health, conflict prevention, reducing harmful traditional practices, and so on. But, you know, if we have consensus that we're living in an emergency, and we're using the language of you know, of breakdown and crisis for climate, then in the same way, absolutely, you know, faith leaders can play a role in mobilizing communities to become, you know, climate smart, in finding the kind of the language and theological spiritual frameworks that can, you know, help guide people's choices to ensure they're, you know, they're resilient to the impacts of climate change. So if faith leaders can be a powerful ally to health workers during the pandemic, they can be a powerful ally to agriculture extension workers, forestry departments, in delivering those same messages about climate change adaptation, but speaking to people on, you know, a deeper level that speaks to their overarching beliefs and norms, rather than just, you know, recommending a best practice that has, you know, a particular material result. The caveat there is, you know, that's as fine as far as it goes for climate change adaptation, but it's not smallholder farmers in rural Africa that need to hear the really big messages about how we, you know, we change course as a species. It's us, and you know, maybe religious institutions have a different, slightly different role. Just to pick up as well on, I think you mentioned, you know, the polarization of debate in the US and other countries. You know, where climate change is, that conversations around climate change have become, you know, polarized along political fault lines, and that's perhaps likely to intensify, and completely understandable. I mean, it's inherently a political issue, but faith institutions often have within their congregations a wide range of political viewpoints that are influenced by faith, to greater or lesser extents and in different ways. That opens an opportunity, and Dr. Wasse, spoke about this and the permanence of faith in communities where political ideologies come and go, to develop a common language and narratives that kind of sit above the really contested political discourse, and that opens the possibility to create quite diverse coalitions around shared principles around climate action that might be a bit more of a struggle for secular organizations to find the language for.
Yeah, if I had to kind of synthesize the lesson I'm learning from you, it's that faith-based organizations could really translate policy and science into the local action that's really needed to fix or improve the situation. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they can.
Thank you. Dr. Wasse, if I could go back in time and just ask you if you could point to, I mean, you've had so many decades of experience in this issue, but if you could point to a moment in time where you had this enlightenment and experienced this insight into the importance of spirituality in the climate and biodiversity crises, if you could give us that historical perspective on when you were really inspired to work on this issue.
I joined, I think, in some 20 years ago, I joined the Ministry of Agriculture as a junior expert. And we were trying to rehabilitate degraded areas. We tried to plant seedlings so that we have some plantations. And we had also the so-called state forests. And all while what we had been trying was to develop and to conserve only on scientific and government drafted policies. And it was not successful, obviously, because what we communicate to the local people were not palatable to them. Sometimes it could be coercive, sometimes it could be too scientific. So I realized that we are not going anywhere. So we planted a lot of seedlings in Ethiopia, in billions, I tell you. And the success rate was very, very low. And the degradation is still going. But on the other hand, when I went to my postgraduate studies, I had to find a study area. So an idea came up. So where is our natural forest? And then it's church forest. Why they survived? Because of their spirituality element and because of their efficient communication ability to the local community. So that was really an eye-opening for me. So wait a minute, now we have to work with faith-based institutions, we have to work with the church to be successful. So the funny thing is, the last 15 years, I myself and my colleagues from different universities all over the world, we have published a lot of scientific papers out of this church forest and in really high-profile journals. Now I realize someone who could read is a person like you, in a university researcher, but not the local community. So our message was floating somewhere else, while the church was simply teaching the community, to save this forest. So really, this is a time, my message is, we have to work, we have to really change our prejudice towards religious and faith-based organization to the local community. We have to really communicate it. We have to communicate with the people. And obviously they are successful. We have failed, but they are successful. And some faith-based organization policymakers or aid organizations academicians, I think we have to change our mind and we have to act quickly, because some of our actions in the future could be too late. I am really concerned. These church forests they have survived with their own mode, but they are in a crossroad now. Unless we help them, one day it will be too late. And so my message is, let's act now. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. I'm dying to read those papers now that you've mentioned. And I think, what's happened here is I've seen this video of the church forest, and now that's brought the science to life. So I want to learn more about the science. And I think that's, the power of multimedia in reaching out beyond the academic community, which they say every journal article you publish, only on average 5 people read it. So this kind of video can be very powerful for that. So thank you for that. I could talk to the 4 of you all day, and I hope this is not the last time that we meet. I'd love to continue engaging with all of you and maybe even make a trip to Ethiopia to see these church forests someday. So we've come to the end of our special hour together, and I'd like to thank all of our guest speakers, Alemayehu, Carmel, Suzanne, and Sam, for your expertise and time today. And of course, a big thanks to the organizers at Vita Ireland, especially Isabel and Louise, for dealing with all the behind the scenes technical challenges so seamlessly. And of course, to Irish Aid for their continued support in Vita's work. So a recording of today's event is going to be available to watch on Vita's YouTube channel by the end of today. And if you enjoyed the discussion or were inspired by it, please feel free to share it with your friends and family, especially in this holiday season. We hope that you all found the film and conversation today to be informative and compelling, and that really today's event could act as a catalyst for ongoing discussion and dialogue around this important theme of spirituality and sustainability. A follow-up email is going to be sent to all of you who registered for this event very shortly with just 3 questions in a survey, and Vita Ireland would greatly appreciate if you could take 5 minutes out of your day to tell us what you thought of this event, in the hopes that maybe they can do more of these and keep improving them. So I'd like to wish you all a beautiful weekend and a happy holidays, and thank you for joining